Hello, my name is NetBeans and welcome to the 60th edition of AirHacks TV. So let's celebrate. This is, I think, 60th episode. It means 5 years. So now celebration is over. Now start with the topics. So first topic is the following. AirHacks FM, two new episodes. One with James Gosling, and I was particularly curious how James Gosling got into programming. So usually I ask the questions from my guests, how they got to programming, how they did it, and with James it's particularly interesting because James started before Java, so it's not that obvious. And also, we recorded a episode with Robert Scholte and Sebastian Daschner about future of Maven and Maven conventions. Also, in about the workshops. What I had to do, I had to cancel all workshops, but the two will still take place. So the Java 8 microservice, MicroProfile Bootstrap and effective Java 8 with MicroProfile will take place. Everything else was shifted to November. And in November, I also will, or the idea is to start a new workshop with the name or about public-private clouds and OpenShift. And also beyond boring Jakarta, so where I can show you a little bit more, something beyond standards, whatever is fun and useful outside the Java, Jakarta, and MicroProfile realm. And what we also get is the microservice Jakarta, microservices with Jakarta and single page apps, and effective web apps. So the first one is more basics, and effective web apps is like extreme hacking with web components, offline apps, and service workers, and whatever you need to build a serious web app. Okay, why I did it? Because of the workload. So I got so many requests, also some on-site workshops for companies, architecture workshops, and I just didn't have the time to spend 2 weeks, almost 2 weeks for trainings. And I would try to do it in November. So, but if you like to come to Munich, just do it. April is around the corner. It's, I think, 3 weeks. And so we will have 2 serious days from zero to best practices. So this is hands-on workshops where I hack along with the attendees if they like to hack with me. And we do whatever is necessary to implement Java apps. So this about the workshops. I will announce the dates soon, the November and December dates. We have already the rooms, but I need some time to announce them. Okay, so this is done. Now, watch and deploy is going strong. Let's see. Oh, 40 stars, not bad. More stars than classes. And actually yesterday in a proof of concept workshop, I managed to deploy in a few hours 80 times. So this is my personal record with WAD, and it deploys simultaneously to WildFly 16, OpenLiberty, and Payara. Yes, yes, exactly. These were the 3 servers. Okay. Now let's start with the topics. And the first topic is from Ulrich, and I think I interviewed Ulrich on my blog about his project. So I know him for a longer time. I think 10 years ago we did our first Java projects together. So our first we met 10 years ago in Java project. And what he asked me, he has some additional libraries which make sense, like MongoDB, Morphia. Morphia is like JPA for Mongo, Prime Faces, Amazon SDK, and so forth. And the problem is his WAR is 30 max. And the question is where to put the libraries in the Payara server. Domain libs, app libs is the right one. It really depends on the class loader, and I will experiment with it in which library actually your libraries are working. And as an inspiration, what I did recently, I implemented a source to image for Payara, and what it does is it copies from xjar the JDBC drivers to a folder on Payara. And of course, you could have whatever libraries you like to be copied on the application server. And yeah, which folder on application server, it usually depends on the class loader. So there are different, also usually application servers have different folders, and some folders are loaded earlier than others. And it really depends on kind of library. So what it basically means is, if this is a JDBC driver, it has to be already loaded earlier in order that the application server is able to preload the connection pools. If the library is like a PDF generator, it can be loaded later because the application server does not care about the library. So it really depends what you are doing. But your libraries like Amazon SDK and Morphia, I guess, you can put them whenever you like, wherever you like, because they are not going to, they are not a part of Java EE. Okay, so check out this S2I, and this is for OpenShift. And without OpenShift, what I would do, I would create a base layer with application server with already the libraries, and then inherit from the image. So take a look at Doclens on my GitHub projects, and in the Doclens there are plenty of examples. And usually I have Payara configured and WildFly configured as example. So we have that. Next one. How to identify the necessary libraries and their transitive dependencies. Build the application, look into the target web in flip. Yeah, this is what you could do. What you could also do is you could steal the idea from WAT, watch and deploy. I also use I have to use some libraries, like for instance Maven invoker in order to invoke Maven. And I use Maven Shade plugin and package all the libraries to a single jar. It works well for me. And what you could do, for instance, you can also launch Maven in the base image, and Maven will pull all the necessary libraries to a folder, and then you are set. So, I mean, you can automate it completely. Okay, I think now you won't have to copy that, because you could run Maven inside the image. And then, after that, the image is done, and all the libraries will remain in the layer. Now, the next one is trivial. Michael QuadX says the Payara cluster EGB timer does not work. And answer is actually, I think it was already covered several times on the AirHex TV. Why it doesn't work? Because you will have to store the configuration of the EGB timers in a central database. And if you don't do this, every node will store the timer configuration in a local database, and they don't know anything about each other. And therefore, you have the problem that that you get independent timers, and you would like to have one cluster timer, so you will have to use a central database. And in the case of Payara, it even ships with SQL statements, create statements. So you only have to execute them in order to get the table. And Ulrich already answered this. Now, wow, while Berks 18 days ago asked me, I'm new in Java EE, I'm reading about beans everywhere. There's a history about them. He's confused. Okay. What is a bean class, local and remote bean? Why do I need them in this way? Interface implementation, difference between them. Are they still used in this way? Do I really need to learn deeply about history of them to do good in Java EE? No. Actually, to do good in Java EE, you will have to know the history, and you will know as much as possible. But to implement decent apps and write really productive and or productively maintainable apps, you don't need to know anything about Java EE, actually. And I have to say, the best projects or the best code I saw in the past was written by people who don't care about Java and care highly about domain concepts. And this was the cleanest and best code ever. And the more people like to play with technology, the more convoluted and complicated the code gets. So simple answer to you, what you only need is, so first, forget about all interfaces. What you have to do is the following. So think about what you would like to do, find a good name for a concept, create a folder or Java package. This folder contains 3 packages, boundary, control, entity. Put into the boundary, if you, for instance, I think you will have to use HTTP and JSON. So create a REST class. And so REST class, what it means is a class annotated with @path, then annotate a method with get, then create another class, just a class, put a stateless on it, and inject the class to the resource with @inject, and you are set. So if you get more logic, create another multiple classes and inject the classes to the @stateless class, but you don't need any more annotations, no transaction, no local, no remote interfaces. And I think with this knowledge, you should be able to survive the first iteration or 2 iterations. Let's say 1 iteration takes 2 weeks. So what it means for you is, after 2 iterations, you can ask a question again, and we can discuss how. So we can do an interactive training, Every 2 iterations, there's a next AirHex TV, and I will try to help you. So, but this is how it starts. And forget, all the remote, all the history. And the history is only important if something goes wrong in your app, or you would like to really deeply understand about latency, performance, and scalability of Java EE. But if you just write reasonable, simple code, your application will rock, and everyone will be satisfied. So now, Lucien, 23, asked me, hey Adam, my questions are about microservice architecture. Are microservices good on cart applications, add to cart, remove from cart, items, and payment? Yeah, but I would start with a monolith. So it means like what you are trying to build is something like small shop, and then I will put everything to the war, like cart, payment, everything, because there is no reason to start with multiple microservices, because multiple microservices make everything more complicated at the beginning. And in my opinion, you always have to have a reason why you create another deployable. So how to deal with who is first problem? For instance, the next question. Booking from service, only 1 room available and too many requests in the same time for booking. Which one to give the room? Implement this with GMS. And if you can, you please explain our best way to achieve that. First, GMS is not necessary. It can be just REST method post, for instance. And the first wins, whoever would first is. I mean, the first who hits the server will win. And this is usually good enough. If it isn't, what you could do is like the clients will have, for instance, to fetch a number from the server first, which would be the order number or something like this, and then go to server again, and then you get your ordering. But the problem is it is really hard to achieve, the ordering in the right way. If you think about this, even the clocks from the clients, they are not synchronized. So the only thing which is consistent is the clock on the server. And the question is, I don't know how hard your problem is, but if you really would like to have the order, then you have to rely on a central database and locking. This is what I can tell you. And usually I would try to avoid that. So the first will win, and this should be good enough. And there's actually, if you consider a distributed system, there's actually no consistency can be guaranteed actually. The third question is, can you make a tutorial on how to secure REST resources with JWT token in Java EE? Of course I could, but I need time to do this. I think about this. What I think about is about series about MicroProfile, for instance. I do a lot of MicroProfile, and I think it would be enough stuff, to have a standalone workshop, online workshop about MicroProfile. And if we go to my blog and you take a look at this right side, so this is a part of the application, and the name is X-ray. And currently, X-Ray is working with a distributed grid, which is actually not necessary, and I really would like to simplify that. And I don't have a database. Therefore I don't need transactions, and I'm thinking about re-implementing the whole thing with MicroProfile. So this will be the first use case I really have. So in my commercial project usually is not that easy because they usually need a database, JPA, and and they already have the server. So just having MicroProfile only application is pointless usually. But in my pet project, this could actually work. So probably I will refactor the application first, and if it works well, then probably record some. This could be later this year, of course. Will be later this year. Some sessions about MicroProfile, and of course JWT as well, because JWT is a part of the MicroProfile MP JWT. Okay, so thank you. Now Vibe of Kulkarni ask me, what are your thoughts on Unikernel? Simplistically speaking, given the size of the whole deployable, including infrastructure, shrinks considerably, why isn't JE not embracing it as yet? Vibe. So what is Unikernel? So Unikernel is an interesting idea where what you are shipping is a single executable without any virtualization. It's like everything is inside, and there's already infrastructure in place which is what is doing this. And he asking me why JE is not embracing it as yet. And so first, we will cover soon something similar to Unikernel without Unikernel, and we will cover soon means in this episode. Second, in my project, it was the deployment speed and war size and RAM consumption was never an issue because the hardware gets cheaper and cheaper over time. It's not like we have to spend more and more money on hardware. We're paying less and less, and even the cloud costs are dropping. It's not like this is a big issue for my clients. And if there is no commercial issue or commercial need, why to optimize? But the idea is interesting, and I remember the conference was Sun, how it is called? It was like Sun Net Days, I think. And it was conference in Frankfurt, in Germany. And before the conference, we had a chance to speak with James Gosling or ask James Gosling a question. So this was like a Java Champions meeting or something like this. And what I remember, I asked James why we are not running Java directly on the hardware without any operating system. So because there is the TCP/IP stack from Solaris back then, and we could just drop the operating system and just run Java directly. So it should be technically possible. So why Sun is not doing this? And I remember, as James answered, he believes that Solaris is already very fast, and why Java without Solaris should run faster than with Solaris, because Solaris already optimizes everything. And he's probably right. So if you will try to strip down the operating system to the minimum and run Java on it, you won't save a lot. So this is what also interesting answer back then. Yeah. So I ask myself always the question what Vibe is also asking me, why Java didn't run, from the beginning without operating system on bare metal. So this was always, I wondered myself why it doesn't happen. Okay, so but Unikernel, I like the idea, but I think there is no need because the Java application servers are already tiny, or tiny. I mean, this is like the first deployment half a gig, and every subsequent deployment kilobytes, and half a gig overhead sounds a lot, but this is hard disk space. No one cares about that. So now Afrimi asked me, in microservices, how to organize user interface and authorization. Should UI be specified in each war or create another server with app to communicate with backend? So I don't get the question exactly, but what we are doing usually is we have two wars, or one war with the REST services in Java and another zip or war with the UI, and UI comprises HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Auth. Should you create an auth service and for each REST resource request, first call the auth service to check authentication authorization? No, what do you usually do? If we, for instance, use Keycloak from great open source Keycloak, how this works is I'm usually spend time with web standards, so it means no frameworks in the front end. So, but Keycloak comes with a JavaScript library, and you can ask the JavaScript library to log in. And this JavaScript library will redirect you to the login page from Keycloak. You will log in, you get the token, you have the token, send the token back to the application server. The application server with MP-JWT uses a public key stored in the WAR on an application server. This really depends on the application server. And tries to verify the signature of the token. And the token was signed with the private key, which is on Keycloak. Then the token gets parsed. The groups are translated to roles, and the user becomes a principal, and then you are in. So that's all. And auth, should you create? Yeah, this is what we. And how to use JWT in microservices? We had the complete from the beginning, to the backend. So the complete flow was discussed right now. So, wow, Philip, double P and double K asked me, hey Adam, I have seen your sessions in tutorials on YouTube. Your NetBeans is fast and also PC. This is surprising because I have a really old Mac, it's 2-3 years old, and what I'm thinking about to buy a new one because I'm a little bit afraid that in one point of time my hard disk will die. And I think I'm 2 generations behind. And usually everyone is faster than me. And in my Windows, NetBeans is laggy. So what I think is what usually happens, if your application server is laggy or NetBeans is laggy, the difference between my machinist and your machinist, I care a lot about security, and therefore I don't have virus scanner installed. So, if you have a virus scanner, it scans whatever the virus scanner can scan, and it takes lots of time. Could you tell your NetBeans version or laptop specs? NetBeans version, I use NetBeans 10 daily builds or NetBeans 8.2. So in the older versions 8.2 and in the recent versions NetBeans 10. But I got similar feedback with what I remember. I had back then Windows Vista. So I don't know whether you will find a really old, conference talks from me on Windows Vista. And I had ThinkPad laptops, and I got the same feedback. And I didn't even have SSD back then. Why you Java E and your NetBeans is so fast? and the only difference is my wars were small, thin wars, no dependencies, and it was always that as it was. So, yeah, I think your Windows PC should be a lot faster than my Apple machine. Okay, now Oscar was double O and 1, Oscar 1. Ask me, I'm trying to learn microservices using Java. I'm confusing with lots of terms based on tutorials, developer talks and docs. Of course, don't watch too much talks and tutorials. Just start with hacking and focus on business logic. This is, I think, the most important advice I can give you. I followed the online workshop and really liked BCE pattern. This is great because I always might ask myself, is it actually a good idea to structure in this way? But the consistent feedback is boundary control entity. The developers really like that because they fully focus on business logic and not, bureaucratic design. In microservices based on this pattern doesn't mean that there should be a BCE per service per war. No, there should be a multiple BCEs per war. So let's say my microservice, let's take the example from the shopping cart question. Where was it? Shopping cart. And probably here, cart applications, cart remove from cart items and payment. So the shopping cart application would be an e-commerce shop. This would be the microservice. And the packages or components would be payment, card, and catalog, let's say. And each of these packages would have the BC inside. Okay. What is a service registry? No idea. We don't need it. But I think, okay, I never mentioned service registry in my tutorials. But if someone mentions service registry, usually you need service registry if you have plain Docker and the services will have to find each other. Never an issue in my projects, because with Docker and Docker Network, the name of the Docker container is the host name, and at OpenShift is the same. So I never used service registry. What really is MicroProfile, and should or why should we use it? So we discussed several times, but what MicroProfile is, think about this like the Java EE is a stable, slow-moving operating system, and the MicroProfile is, you know, the fancy part where we get 4 releases a year, and there's lots of experimentation and going on here. And why should we use it? Because with MicroProfile you get lots stuff for free. Like what I always try to use is metrics, at least for business metrics or configuration. JWT, we already discussed that. So you should use MicroProfile because there is no downside as a part of the platform. And because of a lucky accident, all application servers also support MicroProfile. So if you have a recent Java EE application server, you always have MicroProfile. Okay. Some developers really complicate too much POM. Yeah, make POM too much complicated. I don't really understand it. Should you really complicate it much in a microservice project? Of course not. I do a lot of code reviews, and I have no idea why it happens. So sometimes POM are crazy. So the funniest story about POM was a few weeks ago. What I saw the first time, there was a list of developers, and with a link to a image of them. So if you just if you take the URI, you would find the face of the developer who created the POM. So no idea why it was why it happened, but in Java EE, so what I can advise you, start with probably I created both, but I think this is really easy to start. Start with the Java EE 8 essential archetypes, or search from my blog for it, so you get the easiest possible POM, and this is what I use in all my commercial projects as well. And if you like, use the WAD, this WAD, and it will build a POM and copy to the application server. Can you make a video on microservices using JPA interacting with MySQL database? No, because there is already a microservice Java EE microservices workshop on airhex.io. So if you go to airhex.io, and there is a full series called Java EE microservices. So and here I wrote microservice which talk to via JDBC to a database. I think it was Derby. It doesn't matter because MySQL is just configuration of the data source. Okay, now Qnoid asked me, what is the recommended approach in Java EE 8 or 7 under jax-rs to serialize lazy JPA entities with JSON-B and or JSON, and what are view options to help with framing it? So actually DTO JSON P, let's see. So imagine the workshop is the JPA entity, and the workshop has, for instance, a lazy relation to attendees, which is very true. So the workshop could have, you know, one-to-n relation to attendees, and all are lazy. So now what I do in the projects is JSON object to JSON, and what you can do here, this JSON will serialize itself to JSON object, but with lambdas and streams, you can equally well serialize the attendees, and even if they are lazily loaded, they will be in this moment eagerly loaded from the database. The only thing is, it has to happen inside the jax-rs resource, inside the transaction, which usually is the case because the jax-rs resource comes with @stateless on it, and every method starts with begin and commit, so there's no issue. This is what I'm doing. And of course, what you could do, you can emit here a JSON-B as well. So it will work. Okay, so this is what I'm doing, and I think what you are asking me is probably the difference is what you try to do is that your JPA entities are JSON-B entities at the same time. And then what you can happen that they are serialized later, also after the transaction closes. But this is probably your issue, that the entities, that the transaction closes before the entities get serialized, right? And what you could do with the lazy relations, of course, you could have, this is called a fetch graph. This would be probably the best solution, so that your boundary uses a fetch. It's called fetch graph. JPA fetch graph is a standard to eagerly load all the entities needed for this use case. This would be the best possible case. Okay. Or use custom JSON-B writer annotated with a transactional. This could also work. And entity manager with stateful, I wouldn't recommend that. This would also work. I did it. I did this from time to time with JSF for domain-driven design. So what you could do is, of course, you can keep the entity manager open, and then it will deserialize the entities. So you are really knowledgeable, Qnoid. My first attempt would be, to put this @stateless on the jax-rs resource, and then you get the begin and commit inside the resource, and the hope is that the serialization takes place inside the transaction. If it doesn't, I would try to work with fetch graph. I'll show you, or use the idea with the JSON object or JSON-B. What I think, what could also work, of course, that you have your JSON-B classes and then entities. The problem is the data application, of course, because the JPA entities will have to produce the JSON-B data transfer objects, and this is, of course, stupid because you get your code gets doubled. Sometimes you cannot avoid that, but if you can, you are actually right. So I would try the fetch graph first, and if it doesn't, see you in a few weeks. Now, Niksha asked me, how would you secure your vanilla JS web app with JE backend? Consider the following requirements: form authentication for login, authorization per page, depending on the roles of the elements per page are restricted. Thanks a lot. And I mean, requirements, form authentication for logging. I mean, is it a requirement to have form authentication or just have a login form? Because I would use Keycloak and JWT. This is the most, I would say, standard way to do that. With form authentication for logging, what you get back is a kind of JSession ID, and you will have to pass it back and forth, but then your backend is stateful. And authorization per page. I mean, we have we have single page app, so there is authorization per page. Depending on the roles of the user elements, pages are restricted. Yeah. So if you log in, you get back, the JSON web token. In the JSON web tokens are the groups. They are mapped to roles, and this is dependent on the user. So I would either use the basic authentication, or use the JWT, what I would prefer. And the basic authentication is similar. Is username, password, base64 encoded, sent to the server. And the server will create from this information the principal and the roles. Actually, the application server absolutely doesn't care about how the information is obtained, whether you're sending JSON Web Token or a form-based login or a certificate. At the end of the day, you always get a principal with groups and roles. So, and Viva asked me, is it possible to implement a chat with client microservice with WebSockets in Java EE? Sure. So WebSocket is the perfect case for chat. If so, how can you implement such a thing? I mean, how to implement chat? I even implemented chat for a startup, and the only challenge was, so what I did, I implemented something like it looked like a FaceTime chat or the iMessage from Apple. This is where I got my inspiration. And the only challenge was that I remember that exactly. So there are two views. If I would send you a message, then I'm the owner of the message and all the messages on the left side. But if you receive the message, the bubble is on the right side. So this was a UI challenge, more or less. But it worked with sockets out of the box. So what you will have to do is, if you need a channel, so with WebSocket it's very natural to do. So the question is it actually trivial to build? So the answer is it trivial to build a chat app with WebSockets? And Viber asked me a very good question. I will probably write a blog post about your second question. What is the difference between gauge and counted from MicroProfile? The answer, gauge just exposes a method with int or long, and you get the value as the metric. And this is suitable if you, for instance, would like to expose some value from a database, disk size, or memory or whatever, so something like this. And counted is a more intelligent. So counted is just a counter, so it just counts how often a method was invoked. And there is a monotonic counters and absolute counters, but this is basically, so counted is more intelligent, it counts, and gauge just exposes a number. T. Shagai, and T. Shagai is a former Airhex Munich attendee, came from Nigeria, and as I remember, he spent like 20 hours in the airplane just to visit for one day Airhex, and there were great conversations because Shagai is from Central Bank from Nigeria. They do a lot of Java EE, and what I understood in one point of time, he get all the citizens from Nigeria going through his application. So, and therefore, first question is, what is the most effective way of checking database connection leaks in Java SE and Java EE? So the root answer is there are no connection leaks in Java SE and Java EE because the connection pools are well tested, and what you are suggesting here was DBCB or CP30. You don't have to do this. What you should do instead is you should actually use the built-in JDBC connection pools, and they are fairly stable. So I never heard that Payara, WildFly, or Tommy have trouble with connection management. So what sometimes happened to me is that the connection between the application server, the network connection, and the database broke, and the connections, the logical connections were referenced the physical connection, and the physical connection was broken. And on the first to use, the application reported errors, but you can usually configure this. So your job is to throw away your custom connection pools and use whatever is built into application server, and just use WildFly, OpenLiberty, or Payara, Tommy. Just don't try to build your own application server. Now, in what order should the following be closed, connection prepared, and result set? So what I remember is a page from the old Sun Microsystem trainings, what I delivered from time to time. And the answer is in reverse order. So what are the most effective way APIs, libraries to test for connection pool leakages in Java code? What I suggest for you, brutal, massive parallel testing. And what I will do is I will just use JMH, Java Micro Benchmark Harness. Is a great stress test generator. And so I would just generate a brutal load and see whether your connection pool is still working. Does a high number of slipping connections have a negative impact on database system performance? It really depends on the connection pool, because usually the application servers pool logical connections and they don't have always, to keep the physical connection open. So there could be lazy relation or eager relation. So it really depends on the application server pool implementation and on the database, whether a physical connection to a database really has an impact on the database performance. So, yeah. Shy Guy, thank you and good luck with your application. And by the way, on the current AirHacks workshops, we get even also attendees from far away. So I think, Shy Guy, you are not the guy with the most miles. Okay. Rick Bill, also an AirHacks alumni. I have a question regarding WebSockets with Java EE with OpenShift and Kubernetes. If your service is deployed several times and each client, single page application, gets connected to a different pod, how you make sure you notify all WebSockets clients? So there has to be a back-channel communication. Without that, it won't work. Via JMS or Kafka, only to one instance. For instance, consumer group for the whole application. So you will have to replicate behind the scenes the data somehow, or store it in a central database. There is no other way around. So you could use, for instance, InfiniSpan. You could use whatever you like to distribute the data. It is, of course, additional complexity. Yeah, but I don't see any other solution. Okay, I mean, you ask this way. The first question is, isn't enough, to pick whatever server like, for instance, and if it isn't, then it's more troublesome. Then we get all the, the cap theorem problematic. We discussed the 3 days, so you have to think about that. So you already attended the AirHacks workshop, so you should have the answers. Yeah. Now, problem Zebra asked me 9 days ago, what is your opinion about WildFly Galleon? Interesting concept first. Startup time and heap size. Can the same goals be achieved with removing unused subsystems from the standalone XML? It could. One of the story I keep telling over and over again is clients ask me in Payara comes with OSGI. It's built on OSGI or Glassfish back then. It was Glassfish, and WildFly has WildFly modules which are also similar to OSGI. Ask me to remove JSF and EJB because they wanted to save some space. And so I say, okay, we could do this, but before we do this, I would like to check, the size of the module. And the entire EJB container, I remember exactly, was 680 kilobytes, and JSF was a little bit larger. So I would say, if you remove unused subsystems, you won't save a lot. So what you should do is, you should first, download the full WildFly and see how big it is, and then say, okay, in best possible case, how much space can I save if I remove, whatever is needed? So is it a half? So let's say if the download size is 150 megs and I will reduce it to 70 megs, this is this is like 100% improvement. What does it change? Do we save money? What is the expectation? Why we are doing this? Image build time, because a smaller WildFly building doc images is likely a bit faster. No. Because of immutable nature of WildFly, what usually happens is the infrastructure is stored in an image, and what you are pushing just a thin war, so the size of application server does not matter. The WildFly, so the ThinWars deployments are independent. The speed and performance is independent from the application server size. Disk space, yeah, this shouldn't be an issue in 2019 and actually never was. What is the use case for Thorntail? I have no idea. This is what I always ask myself, so know why we need Thorntail, because WildFly is very small. And so without Docker, OpenShift, clouds, then I would see the point of Thorntail. But I have to say, in all projects, I'm right now, we have at least virtualization, so we never run on bare metal. Yeah, so cool. Next question. So the problem is we have 29 questions today, and I will try to cover them all. So first, Jay Samir asked me, my question is about Java security, Java 8 best practices, for which somehow there are surprisingly little resources. The question is, yeah, what you would like to do. So I mean, usually if you just would like to have JWT, it is already achieved without JSR 375. And with JSR 375, what you could do, you could in addition, go to your own database, fetch some roles or implement additional authentication or enhance your principal. So this is what you could do. So how to handle authentication and authorization in Java EUA in a module R, which is used by other modules running on the same application server. One of the responsibilities of the module R is authentication authorization, which can be used by other modules. So how it usually works is if you enter, the first component, the application server will authorize you or authenticate you, and then if you have the same thread, whatever you call, you are the authenticated user. Which interfaces to implement? None of the interfaces. So don't implement any interface in Java. How does this work with EJB? Should any of the implemented classes be EJB? They can be, but don't have to. Yeah, it will work everywhere. Whatever you inject, it runs in the scope of the principal, and this add inject principal is available everywhere. Actually, yesterday or day before, we did the whole day workshop about that. This is what I told you. We had 80 deployments. This was exactly what we implemented. A custom principal with custom roles with JSR 375, but only because the client had specific requirements. Most examples I found are just about web application authentication, not about a module which doesn't care where the caller has the credentials from. So this is what I did not understood now, because usually the communication starts from outside the application server, and usually it is web, and then you are authenticated. It seems like you're asking, how to authenticate without the web part. So it's like there is no UI, and the answer could be, if you are a message-driven bean, for instance, then there is a mechanism that you can say run as. So I'm running as, the user without authentication, if this is the question. If not, I'm not really sure what you are asking. And even if you have multiple modules, so what does it mean, module? For me, module is a war. It doesn't make any sense to have a war, multiple jars. Inside a war, and a module could be a package. I guess this is the package from BCE. So you can call from one class to another, and if you have in the same thread, you are authenticated. This is the answer. I already listened to your podcast about that, so thank you for listening. And I had a podcast episode with Ariane Times about that. Okay. Dempiler. Oh, by the way, about podcasts, there was one episode you should listen to. Was an episode with Ondro from Payara, and we talk about clouds and how Java can fit the clouds. And there are more such episodes actually in the pipeline, so stay tuned. Now, Dempiler asked me, I have a database cluster with 3 nodes, and we want to distribute the load such that we write on one node and read from other nodes. And how to implement that? So very easy. Database have to support that. So you will have to set up hot standby on a database level. Then what I usually do to entity managers, 2 distinct connection pools with different configuration, and you use the entity manager, one entity manager to writing and the others for reading. And in this particular case, it could make sense to introduce a data access object which encapsulates 2 entity managers, And now you see all the data access object lovers and the repository lovers. This is the unique opportunity to introduce the pattern. Okay. Next question. Zach905. I have two non-related questions. What is the future of Jersey? So the future of Jersey, in my eyes, is good or bright. And if you go to Eclipse E4J Jersey, you see they are busy actually. So they are working, and I think Jersey is fairly popular framework. Of course, everything can die, but I think Jersey is healthy. So if you take a look, so they have this is the Eclipse E4J project, and I don't see any problems with Jersey, I have to say. Okay, based on web component tutorials you provide, you recommend using web components and writing the front end from the ground up without any framework. Yes, this is the reason why I had to cancel the AirHexCom in Munich, because I got too many requests about that. Is it that too time consuming? Actually, not at all. So basically, the developers were amazed how productive this is. And there is a misunderstanding. It's not like I'm building everything from scratch. But for instance, I don't need any infrastructure framework. I don't need NPM and all the infrastructure. So I use web component to structure my application and use the web APIs like fetch, to interact with the server. But if I recognize that, for instance, I need a decent table or date picker, I just use, for instance, Vaadin components, or I take a look on other components. But Vaadin is a high quality components, open source with. This is important for me. You can buy support for them, which is important for my clients. And then we use decent tables or date pickers. And Polymer, I don't use Polymer at all. I use one simple library from Polymer called lit-html. And Skate.js, never used that, but could use it. I think Skate.js also comes with components. Skate.js. There was one library which... No, this is not that. I don't use Skate.js. There was another component with. It was like it looked like it brought functional components. So I don't need any abstraction, because the components are lean enough. And this is not only my opinion. Everyone who work with me, they said, okay, this is really easy. And also, this was actually the best, how it's called, litmus test for vanilla web components. At the end of 2018, there was an airhex.com workshop at Munich Airport where like Swing and JavaFX migration to web. And there were multiple attendees who were forced to migrate to web. And they had no idea or no experience about web, HTML, JavaScript, and CSS. And what I did is we took a look at the application and try, in a proof of concept fashion, to hack something which could work for them, just like a rough structure. And they were actually really surprised that how easy and lightweight it was to just use the web standards without any external libraries. So I don't think with lit-html and web components I'm significantly slower or slow at all than someone who uses full-fledged framework. This is like the same, like I cannot believe that someone who I will hack something with Java and someone else use something else, I would be significantly slower than someone using complete different technology. So Der Arztmann, and Der Arztmann is an old friend. We met several times, even at JavaOne. The problem with Der Arztmann, he asked me, and now I should blame him publicly, to write another interview for a team from him. And I wrote the questions, I sent him the mail, and now I have no answer from his team. And attendees from the company, this is Otto, because if you go to my blog and search for Otto Microservices, you will find the interview with him. And the attendees told me, that he is really, ashamed, but he will provide me the answers in the next interview about microservices on Java E. And this was 3 months ago. So, nice to see you. What are your thoughts on Quarkus? Bastian. So, Bastian, first, I will answer your question if you give me the interview. Not true. We are nice. What I did, Quarkus. So, airhex. So, this is starter from Quarkus. And what is Quarkus? Quarkus is an interesting project. This is too new, to be an expert. I think it was announced a few weeks ago. And it is from Red Hat. And it looks really good. Of course, I have no project experience with that. But first, this is the Quarkus starter. And what's interesting, this is not a Maven archetype, which is an interesting idea. And I would like to start a project here. And so it started. And you see, you get a nice, so the developer experience is nice. So I get a nice feedback like, you can do this to compile the application. And so I would just say Maven install first and see what happens. So it runs everything, runs the tests, which is and is done. So and what I'm interested in, how it looks inside. And I would just open NetBeans. The NetBeans 10. And by the way, you ask me what's actually the specs are. So I have 2016 Mac, so it's 3 years old. My processor is 2.9 gigahertz Intel i7, and I have 16 gig of memory. And the problem with my memory is always low because, as you can see, I have a Docker running here. And the Docker comes with, I think I dedicated 4 cores with Docker, so I usually have never more than 4 cores here. And if OpenShift runs, it also dedicated 4 cores. So what it basically means, my machine shouldn't run at all because already all 8 cores are occupied by the other stuff. But just rerun that, and we have Quarkus getting started. Official review here. And first, POM is surprisingly short. What I, of course, don't like the face-safe plugin here, but it could be eliminated, and the Quarkus Maven plugin, and I think this one is important because it does something behind the scenes. What I couldn't check that, but this could be removed. And the Maven plugin, no idea what happens here. The Surefire plugin should be deleted as well. Could be deleted as well. And we have the Quarkus Unit 5 is optional. Rest assured should be deleted, so it's not needed. So basically, we have 2 dependencies. This Quarkus, how to pronounce that actually? Quarkus properly. Quarkus rest easy, and Quarkus arc. So we have 2 dependencies, which is actually lean enough, and the whole POM is 120, so it's 3 times longer than official Java 8, my Java 8 plugin. But I mean, good enough, for cloud native is okay. So now the source code is just jax-rs, which I really appreciate and like. Test is, of course, strange because they use rest assured. I don't like rest assured, and the only reason is rest assured is not reusable. So what I usually do, I use jax-rs. I'm using jax-rs to O client, and the jax-rs to O client tests look a little bit uglier, but the huge benefit is I can reuse my jax-rs test as a stub for another microservice, and the rest assured tests are not reusable at all. Okay, so what else? So we have a Docker file, which looks reasonable and looks very similar to my Docker files from Doclens. So this is also thumbs up. And in metainf, I have index.html. Okay, this does matter. And config profile, microservice profile, also looks good. And of course, all the dependencies here. But you see WildFly, which is undertow, but small rye config. Small rye is like polyfill for microservices, for MicroProfile. So, but let's say I don't care about that. Now, first, what interests me, what was built. And there is a Quarkus runner. And the interesting part is 32K. So it means the whole thing is 32K, which is amazing. So if I run it, No. I would like just to run it. So getting started. So it was started. And what's already installed, CDI and REST easy. And let's see whether it actually works. So I will go here. And it works. So so the first impression is for third-party framework, surprisingly lean. And I never built a serious application with Quarkus, but I mean, for my X-ray, it would be a nice weekend project. For my clients, too early. My question is always, what happens if something breaks inside? So how I can help them. And it is lean and small, but it's not that faster than a WildFly full. But I like what I see here, And there's of course more magic. But what I already like, there is no magic required to start the whole Quarkus. What I don't like exactly is what Quarkus suggests. Where was it? To use magic Maven stuff in order to launch your. Where was it? Here. So with Quarkus dev. So it will run Quarkus already for me, and this is what I don't like. I don't like the Quarkus dev, because why I need Maven plugin to start the server. It's like Maven is build tool and not start tool. But I will try to strip down the example and probably record a screencast about that. But I really like that. And Red Hat is behind Quarkus, so I guess you could buy a supported Red Hat, and then everything is fine. So if my clients like it, they can get Quarkus. Okay, so we covered Quarkus, and I have to say to all listeners, I did it also. Bastian didn't provide me the interview. So, Destasio, I forgot the first name, he's alumni from Airhex as well, asked me, I'm curious, what's your opinion about the just released Quarkus project? I like it. About 2019 predictions. So, do you think the balance between Spring Boot and Java will change? I have to say, I never got so many Java requests this year. So the first time I had to cancel the airhex.com workshops in Munich Airport because of projects. And I have no idea. I mean, Spring Boot is very similar to Java EE. What's more important than the whole Java ecosystem is healthy, and it looks like it's very healthy. And what I just see is a huge interest in MicroProfile. And what I also see is, if I add some MicroProfile features to existing Java EE applications, everyone is really excited. So I would say MicroProfile is extremely, I would say, positive experience. And changing the current situation of Spring dominance, what I have to say is, I never was in Greenfield Spring project. Whatever I do, Greenfield is Java EE. So for me, it's like, will MicroProfile change, the Java EE dominance? And I think in some project it could, like in my X-ray project. So now I see a lot of interest in Java EE low latency. I also see the interest. In one project, they were concerned with latency and EGBs. And so they tried to optimize milliseconds, and the problem was the database, and they had logs which took 100 seconds. No kidding. So but what I absolutely see, there are some use cases for low latency apps. And now I assume it's Alessandro is the name, Destasio, exactly, from Italy, asked me, apart from GC optimization, what kind of technical solution can help to address this kind of requirement? Alessandro should know this because he attended my workshops. And what I usually do is I launch a stress test with, for instance, Apache benchmark, then launch JVisualVM, go to the, how it's called, it's not the profiler rather than the, how it's called, it's a different name. So it's one button to the right, and not the profiler is too slow, but the other one, it just, captures the performance. And with the performance, you see what actually takes too long. And latency is the ping time. in Java EE, what has an impact on latency is, of course, all the queues. So the deeper the queue, request queue, the longer the latency. So if you care about low latency systems, don't queue anything and try to process everything immediately with thread pools and have no more threads instead. So there is some standard project library on purpose. Yeah, Java is low latency. And the funny story is, in one project, we just implement stock application, and there was a database expert who had no idea about Java and asked me, the Java crap, why it's so slow? It seems like we lose on every request 3 milliseconds, and the JDBC driver responds in 1 millisecond. It was like this, like 3 milliseconds, that fast? It's like fast? It's 300% slower than the JDBC driver or the whatever driver I had. So it's like, it's just like 3 milliseconds per call. It's like great. So, if you really care about low latency, there is a pattern called Disruptor. It's a pattern. It's a Java SE library, and you can use it. It's like a ring buffer, but I wouldn't know for what except trading applications. So for trading, just go ahead. For standard apps, it doesn't matter. Another great question. So let's talk about project documentation. There's a sort of standard Jira and Confluence utilization. A lot of open source projects are using them. And there's also Git and AsciiDoc tools. What's my opinion on? So what's your suggestion about this topic? What tools methodology you utilize in your commercial project for both issue tracking docs and Wikidocs? So I really like AsciiDoc and Git. This is what I always do. And one funny story, just like you couldn't read my mind. Last year, I documented everything with AsciiDoc and Git, and my client has Jira. No Jira, both, but they wanted to have the documentation in Confluence, and we had to convert that. And I think Confluence is terrible for writing tutorials like documentation. Confluence is great as a wiki, but it's not as good as tutorials. And now we have, before that, we have a beautiful PDF document, and now we have a mess of, unrelated links. And so I have to say, I prefer AsciiDoc. And even if I use Confluence, what I usually do, I go to the edit button in the right upper corner, and you get the HTML source code. And I write the whole documentation in HTML and paste it to Jira because I'm faster. Okay, so I would say Jira, Confluence, of course. So if you ask me, I'm for AsciiDoc and Git. Oh, my Git doesn't matter. AsciiDoc or the other one, AsciiDoctor, and I forgot. There are actually two standards. And enjoy Florence, and of course, if you can, come back, in the winter. So let's drink some coffee on the airport and take a chat. Now, Igalasm or LGlasm, this is the question. 3 hours ago, ask me, we don't have the possibility to use Docker for our systems at the moment. Why not? Okay, but I understand, no security reasons, whatever. We are using Packet to configure, install, and deploy. We are packaging our war and application server in RPM. So I saw it several times with RPM. Is there a more efficient way to install WildFly and deploy the applications that you can recommend? I mean, if you cannot use Docker and you have just bare metal, the Quarkus part could be interesting for you. I mean, exactly what you did before, because then you can just copy the jar and you are set. And you are of the Vue developers who could actually enjoy Thorntail, because with Thorntail, you can package everything in a jar and then copy this to your bare metal machine and wait for Docker. And if the Docker comes out, kill Thorntail, migrate to WildFly, and you are golden. Unbelievable. We covered 30 questions today, more than 30 questions. But this is the 60th episode, so it's absolutely okay. So now, we didn't cover any. Oh, we have questions, Twitter. So first, Carlos Bustamante asked me, quick question about your 7 kilobyte war. The Swagger UI jars are provided with the application server? Yes, it is in Open Liberty. or you define it at POM XML. No, Swagger is never in the war. It's always on the application server, and we use a MicroProfile Open API to generate Swagger. Now, this is unrelated, but there's another video, running Java code without compilation, which was when was it? 17 minutes ago it was published. So what I do from time to time, I publish 2 minutes tutorials to Oracle developers, because this is Bob Rubert is a nice guy, asked me to do this. And what's surprising, all Java and Java E, or most are Java E videos, are crazy popular actually. So if you like, take a look on this. Now we covered this. This Yahya will attend the AirHex, so he's really impatient, but highly welcome to the AirHex workshops. So there's actually no questions left. So I would say thank you for watching, and see you at the 61st AirHex TV. Listen to AirHex. Oh, the last thing, my personal thing, which I announced on my blog but I forgot to mention. Hexagonal architectures. I got lots of questions, and some of my clients also ask me, about hexagonal architectures. And I have to say, on Java E, they only make a very little sense. They would make sense if I would get this, SMS adapter, email adapter, search adapter, ORM adapters, or whatever adapters you need. So this part makes sense, but this incoming part is so well already, exposed and encapsulated by the application server. So any further encapsulation just destroys, the beauty of Java E. So you get, command request responses and stuff no one cares about. And without the hexagon here, I would just get, a single class, and the code becomes simpler. So my feeling is that the hexagonal architecture was developed before Java E was actually that lean as it is today. And it makes absolute sense if you would create from scratch the whole communication layers with Java SE, but in my eyes makes less sense with Java E. So this is my personal opinion. Yeah, and my hexagons usually is just a line, because the what we use usually is just jax-rs. We don't have, what is it? Consumer GUI console commands. We don't have console commands, admin UI. So what do you only have a jax-rs? So it means in most applications my hexagon is like that. So this is like, and by the way, I will suggest soon a talk octagonal architectures. Why no? Hexagons were yesterday's, and I think now it's time for the new age of architectures. And somewhere on a conference, watch my talks, I will talk about octagonal architectures. I would pentagram architectures would be also interesting, or pentagon, no pentagram, sorry, pentagon architectures, but penta is one less than hexa, so octagon is I think better. Okay, now this, and what I also forgot to mention, someone asked me, he likes the where was it? Your web standard talks are awesome. So, and really thank you for this statement, because what I completely forgot, call for papers for CodeOne is the CodeOne conference in San Francisco. And I will submit talks, and probably one talk about the backend and one talk about the front end. And thank to you, because with your statement, I remember that, okay, if the talks are appreciated, so then I have to submit, otherwise I would forget the CodeOne. Now, also, Jakarta EE dot blocks. No. There's a new page, Jakarta. This is wrong one. It's this one. If you're writing blog posts about Jakarta E, so this is the blog post from today, but they are from GraphCool with Cumulus, and just register to this. This is like blog aggregator. And the idea is, this is from Jakarta E, so there are all the blogs. There are not that much, so you should register your blog as well. Because what I would like to achieve is that in the morning, I would just open, the latest post and see what's going on in the Java E world, and how it was, I would say 10 years ago. Do you remember javablogs.com? It's no more active. javablogs.com, but this was a nice place, exactly. to have a blog aggregator about Java, and I think Jakarta E blogs could be something interesting about Jakarta E and MicroProfile. So, thank you for watching. See you at upcoming airhacks.com around the corner in Munich. And I will, because I have lots of episodes of, I will publish now once per week a new episode on Airhacks FM, and then slow down a bit because, yeah, the queue is full. So thank you and bye.